Good morning, everyone. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands that we all come from today. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on gorgeous Larrakia land here in tropical Darwin, and I'd like to pay respects to the elders, both past and present, of all of the countries that are represented here today. So my name's Alinta Maguire. I am a proud Yuin woman, and I'm also an Indigenous Business Manager at Westpac. I'm very excited to be here for today's Westpac Ruby and Pep Talk Her webinar today, getting to hear from women from all over this beautiful country, from urban cities to remote communities. I get to visit a lot of these areas, and what stands out most to me is the powerful change that can come about when women are brought together and how they provide genuine support to each other in their many communities. That's also what I love about the Ruby community. It embodies this and empowers you, no matter where you're located or where you are in your financial journey. So thank you for being a part of this community. And I'm particularly excited about this session today with Joanne, Lenny and Narelle. I know there'll be many takeaways for all of us, learnings that will help us all to strive for gender equality and boosting the financial confidence of all women. So thank you, please enjoy, and back to you, Maggie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're so grateful to you for that fabulous introduction, and a huge hello to anyone who is just joining us. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. Happy Friday, and a shout out to everyone who is in lockdown right now. We understand it's a particularly difficult time, and we are certainly thinking of you all. My name is Maggie Palmer, and I'm the founder of a company called Pep Talk Her. We started with the mission to close the gender pay gap. So unfortunately, we've got a lot of work to do, but it is such a delight to partner with the fabulous Westpac Ruby Connection program, which is there to really help support all women in business and all women looking to find financial security, financial freedom, and to improve their financial education. So it's a delight to be hosting today's session. We're going to be talking about how can you grow your business today using supplier diversity programs and tapping into procurement programs that exist. Some of you may never have heard of this. Some of you may have taken advantage of this in the past. We've got the fabulous Lenny, Joanne, and Narelle joining us today. Some of them have experienced the upside of these supplier diversity programs. But Joanne, let's kick it off with you to start with. And I want to go ahead and introduce you. You work with Westpac and you focus specifically on the supplier diversity programs. Can you give us a tweet-sized introduction into what supplier diversity is?
Thanks, Maggie, and good afternoon, everybody. I would like to acknowledge the lands that I am having this meeting on, which is the Cammeraygal lands of the lower North Shore of Sydney. I also send my absolute love and comfort to everybody that's going through lockdown at the moment, because it's pretty tough. And on to supplier diversity, particularly relevant at the moment when we're all really struggling. Supplier diversity is when a business looks at actively providing opportunities for groups that are traditionally underrepresented or financially disadvantaged. So within Westpac, we focus on 5 groups: businesses owned by women, businesses owned by Indigenous Australians, Australian disability enterprises, social enterprises, and B corporations.
That's awesome.
Can I add anything else?
No, sorry, I was on mute. It's like the quote of 2021. You're on mute. I was on mute. And I would love to hear from you who's joining us today. Can you let us know in the chat if you are indeed a woman-owned business, if you are an Indigenous person who's running a business, if you identify as someone living with a disability running a business? Let us know in the chat your name, where you're joining us from today. And if you want to acknowledge that you fall into one of these groups of people who would qualify for the Westpac Supply Program, please let us know. We would love to hear from you in the chat and hear a little bit more about your story. Lenny, you run a fantastic business and you have been involved with supplier diversity programs. Can you quickly give us I guess a synopsis of how that's impacted your business? You know, you run Swan Group, one of the only female-led construction companies in Australia. And in the past, I know that you've been reluctant to sort of focus on that female-led part of your story. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so Swan Group has been around for, sorry, apologise for my voice, but hopefully it will last. So we've been around for 20 years now, and it's actually changed a lot in that time. And I guess we've been fortunate enough to have done work for Westpac now for more than 10 years. Back in the early days, I don't know if supply diversity was on the radar for any of us. But I think now as I'm looking to grow, and it is a challenging market out there, you do need to look for the opportunities where you can find them. And I have seen a lot of positive change in the last 2 years when we are talking about supply diversity. And I think, you do need to look for these programs, and that's also a good way of creating yourself a new type of network.
We're hearing a lot about this. I've heard of, Joanne mentioned that, you've mentioned it as well, the power of the network when it comes to understanding more about supplier diversity programs and certainly accessing them as well. We have the fabulous Narelle Anderson joining us. Narelle, your company Envirobank is, another business in a slightly male-dominated industry of the waste and recycling industry. What Lenny said to you, does that resonate with you as well?
Yeah, it does, 100%. And I've been in the waste and recycling industry now for 20 plus years. So certainly a pioneer and almost a lone wolf in that space when it started. And I've always found that women are particularly good at networking. And I think organisations and groups like the Ruby Group make it much easier for us to do so. And these kind of programs, the supplier diversity programs that Westpac and others run, really are excellent opportunities for women to look for opportunities that might suit their businesses. So I have many companies actually. Envirobank is where I spend most of my time. Maybell Group is a furniture company that I own that is also a supplier to Westpac. And I'm just about to start a new business in the food sector. And so these networks are very important to touch base with everybody and find out what opportunities there are.
And I know that one thing that we talked about earlier was that you've said in the past, you get heaps of stuff done, you've got a successful woman, but you just so happen to be Indigenous. And I wonder, when you think about, going forward for these procurement programs at different businesses, do you ever, in the past, did you ever sort of hold yourself back and think, I don't want to, go for these diversity programs? Was that ever something that was in the back of your mind?
Not so much that I didn't want to go for them, more that I didn't know that they existed, really.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, when you start out in business, you just really go for everything and, no matter what. But there wasn't a lot of information when I started. And I don't think a lot of these programs, to be perfectly honest, as Lenny said, existed when I started in business. And now they're here. And obviously that helps us make our way through what's required from connecting with corporate partners. So we've been working with Westpac for some time through Maybell Group, which is our furniture business.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I would say to people that are looking for opportunities to work with large corporates, systems and processes mean something. So when you're starting your business, you kind of just get out and do the sales and get on with the job. But as you grow and evolve, systems and processes actually help you work more closely with corporates and tick the boxes that you need to tick from a procurement perspective. So
that's awesome. I love that. And it's interesting what Narelle said, and Joanne, this is probably a great question for you. She didn't always know these programs existed. I didn't know these programs existed, honestly, until about a year ago. How should, procurement programs, they're a little bit of a newer thing, would you say, Joanne? But they're growing, right? And more companies are bringing on people specifically, just like you, to run procurement programs at large companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So is your question how to find out about it, Maggie?
Yeah, and we're having a lot of people saying in the chat, how can they find out about these opportunities? Who should they talk to? What should they look for?
It's a really great question. My advice would be maybe have a look at people's websites. There's often declarations around, and look under the sustainability sections and see what it is that organisations are focusing on. You can also, a really great place to start is governments. Governments tend to be a little bit ahead in this space because their remit is around helping the community. And then also organisations that supply to governments, because governments love to leverage the power of business to help it meet its targets as well. So have a look on the websites. You can also start with people like me, reach out, say, hey, do you know of another company, or could your company do with buying the goods and services that we provide? And then, like, often if I don't have a need for those goods and services, I may know somebody that does. So there are several organizations out there that are really leading in this space. I also talk quite a lot to the likes of Microsoft, to Lang O'Rourke, Lendlease, Lion, EY. I'm going to shout out for my colleagues at CBA and ANZ that are doing great space. It's not a competitive space. We really want to help organizations kind of just get noticed.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And Lenny, you run a business that has been noticed by a lot of big companies, and you are involved in some different procurement programs. How did you initially find out about them, and how do you sort of go about, I suppose, networking or building those relationships with these large companies so that, you can grow the business through those partnerships and through, frankly, tapping into those budgets and the impact that you can have working with these businesses?
I think you need to be realistic. You need to start small, and your business is tough, and you have to also be prepared for knockbacks. There's going to be a lot of knockbacks, and you just need to take it as an opportunity to grow your resilience. So, but I think, also touching on what Joanne said before as well, people are there to answer questions. So I always look at every knockback as an opportunity, to seek feedback, because if you don't seek feedback, how can you improve? And I think also, as Norelle noticed, is that sorry, it's all these popping up on my screens at the moment, sorry, technical errors in my department.
You're fine. You are.
Yeah. So I think also, processes does mean something. So, unless you seek feedback on, where did I go wrong in this submission? Where did I go wrong? People are there to help you. People are there to answer questions. And I think it's also really lovely to see that, big businesses or even small businesses realizing that, you do need a network. So when people can refer you or put you in touch with other people, it's an amazing opportunity. And it just really helps when someone gives you a name and you can maybe touch base with them via email or a phone call saying, this person said that you might be someone worth talking to. As soon as a name is involved in that conversation, the door opens much more easily. So I think it's more about asking feedback constantly.
Yeah, asking for that feedback. And Norelle, would you say as well, there's a lot of questions coming through to me on the chat, and thank you to everyone sending through questions. Please do let us know your questions. We have 15 minutes to go, so we're happy to take as many questions as we can get to. Norelle, you founded Envirobank, you've got Maybell Group as well. You also sit as a board member on the New South Wales Indigenous Chamber of Commerce. What would your advice be to people on the call today who are like, I run a business, we have clients, we'd like more, we'd love to work with bigger business, we'd love to have the opportunity to connect in with procurement programs. Where do you think they should start? What would your advice be for people who've never been through that process before?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Joanne said, seek out the networks, look at people's websites, the organisations that you want to do business with, do your homework, have a look at their organisations, and then don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Procurement teams are happy to help you. They want to procure from you as much as you want to be bought from. And both parties, if you have that conversation in the beginning, you can find out what you need and where your gaps might be. Don't be afraid to ask. It's so important to be resilient when you own a business. Today more than ever, when where businesses are open and closed at the wave of a premier's wand. So you need to be resilient, and just remember that the answer is no if you never answer the question. So always ask the question, what's the worst thing that can happen? And LinkedIn is also another good network to reach out to find people that may be able to connect you to various procurement managers, or seek out other people in business. Whenever I do a presentation, I always offer up my experience, if you like. So if there are any ladies on the phone today that want to know, you know, an answer to a question, perhaps offline, just reach out and ask your sisters. You know, we're always more than happy to help.
Maggie,
That's-
there was, Maggie,
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
may,
Go
there was one actual extra channel that I forgot to mention. So there are organisations that help connect women-owned businesses with large corporates. So there is We Connect International, which has a presence in Australia. There's also Fem Economy. There's a few others out there as well that a quick Google search will help you find. And they often, for me, having to find the businesses using these directories are quite helpful for me, because otherwise I'm just doing a Google search, and women aren't always forthcoming on their websites that they are actually women-owned businesses. So if they've registered with these organisations, it really helps me find them much more easily.
So that's really interesting. And so some of you may be on the line thinking it's quite remarkable that Joanne's actually proactively out there looking for businesses, possibly just like yours, right? So let's make that connection opportunity even easier. And Narelle, just want to acknowledge, so generous of you to offer to support people beyond this call as well. I really appreciate that thoughtfulness. Lenny, I want to, and again, if you've got questions, please pop them in the chat so that we can get to them, and we'll put those resources in the follow-up email as well. We Connect, Fem Economy, and there's a few others too that we'll keep you posted about. Lenny, when you first went through a procurement process, what impacts did that have on your business? In terms of revenue, in terms of like the revenue, in terms of like, I'm assuming it was a pretty massive injection for the better.
Oh, do you know, especially if you can go, do you know, if you can create those long-term relationships with those big corporates, do you know, it is massive, do you know? So I have a long-term relationship with Westpac and also with CBA. So, do you know, they are a big part of my revenue stream. But, do you know, and also, they're also solid players. If the banks are not going to pay us, who's going to pay us? So, do you know, as a business, you need to think about these things too, do you know, because it is tough. So it is, do you know, I think you have to be diligent when it comes to, they require a lot when it comes to processes and forms and those kind of things. So you also have to be realistic. If that's not your strong points, make sure you go out and find someone that can help you in that field. As entrepreneurs, not everyone loves sitting there and filling out forms. Do you know, it's not for all of us. Some of us have a little bit shorter attention span than others. So, do you know, I can, you know, in the early days, I was sitting there and doing all the forms and digging through it, but it's also creating yourself a bit of a library. Over time, you will see that the same type of questions getting asked is coming across all the different things that you're going for. So I think that's why the feedback is so important too, because what's the point of going through that process for maybe 5 different companies, which is very, very heavy and time consuming unless you get it right the first time. So I would really say take the time, and if you're not getting it right, seek that feedback, because, you know, it's constantly about tweaking, you know. Just as an example of that, I've been in business now for 20 years, but my business is constantly evolving and I constantly have to diversify to kind of stay on top of everything, because the market is constantly changing. And as part of that, we have really worked heavily the last 12 months about going into new build construction in the commercial sector. The first bids that went in, we failed miserably. Do you know, we knew we could do the job, we had the skill sets, but going up against some of the big construction companies, my submissions wasn't up to scratch. So we see constant feedback. And the last 4 weeks, I have secured my first 3 new construction jobs. So do you know, but it's been a long job getting there. So do you know, but it's just that, you know, touching on that resilience. I just picked up another one yesterday, so I'm pretty happy this week. So yeah.
Yay! Well, let's take a moment to celebrate you. That's fabulous news. We love to hear that. That is fabulous. And such good feedback. I mean, we've been through the procurement process with a few large companies like SAP and Salesforce, and it's a lot of paperwork, to your point, a lot of back and forth on the emails. But what I found is that people are also very happy to talk you through it. They understand that it's arduous. Frankly, it's tedious sometimes, but I found anyway, people, if I ask questions, they're like, oh yeah, just do this. Oh no, tick box C, that's a lot easier. Like that will help me understand it. Narelle, what's been one of the biggest challenges for you? You've had a lot of experience and you've had a lot of opportunities where you've worked and you've had procurement processes be successful with large companies and you've worked bloody hard to get there. What's been the biggest challenge for you going through these procurement processes, would you say?
I remember actually the first big procurement contract that we won, an online, the clock ticks down and you have to answer all the questions it's very stressful. And then when we won, can I tell you what I did? I actually burst into tears. I was at a table with some friends and I got a message that we'd won the contract and I burst into tears and they were like, oh my God, what happened? And I said, we just won the biggest contract that, is literally going to change the course of this business. And then after crying, I thought, oh my God, so now we've got to execute. And I picked up the phone to the person who we were going to be dealing with and just thanked them and let them know how important that opportunity was for us. We obviously won on our own merits and we were up against big billion-dollar companies. But I needed them to know that that business was really important to us and that along the way, we would always be checking in to make sure that we were on the right path. And I used to meet with the head of that project, even when we really didn't have things to talk about, just to make sure that, everything was still going and ended up building a great friendship with that particular person. But yeah, it is, life is always all about relationships. We all need to be connected. We all need the opportunity to collaborate. We all need to have a sense of belonging. And deep down, we really all want to help each other. So procurement managers, like I said before, want to help you get the job as much as you want to get the job. It's really just about finding the right path for both of you. And if it's not the right path, because sometimes it isn't, it's finding out, how you can make it your pathway next time round. So again, as Lenny said, really don't be shy to ask the question and don't be shy to get the follow-up and find out what didn't work the first time so that you can do better the next time. You think about those buzzwords, continuous improvement. That's what business is. You win some, you lose some, you get disappointed, you kind of get back up. Just like when you teach your kids to kind of ride a bike, right? When they fall off, you don't go, well, that's it, never try that again. You've got to keep going, you've got to keep going, and you've got to keep persevering. And eventually, the tide turns and you win, but along the way, you get some really awesome lessons. And maybe you realize that you need knee pads and a helmet too. So which sometimes you do need those two things in business as well. Lenny probably knows that, being in the male dominated industry as well.
Wonderful advice. Wonderful advice. That resilience that you've both spoken about is so important, and the power of those relationships. And I loved what you said as well. Like we sometimes forget, we get caught up and we think, oh, why would this big business want to do business with little old me? But to your point, often they really want to help you. They want to see you win. They want to see you succeed. And I just want to acknowledge, I've had some really kind people sending messages through to me directly on the chat who do work at big businesses or medium-sized businesses who would love to work with more diverse suppliers. So I want to quickly, Joanne, we're running out of time and I want to get to a few other questions. Just super quickly, tweet size, Joanne, if people are on the line today and if they work for companies who have budget to engage suppliers, what can they do to diversify their supply chain and to help support some of the people on the call today?
Oh, that's actually quite a big question. It really depends on what the organisation is focused on. What they can do really is look at what it is they buy, connect with those directories and see if there are suppliers that fit into those diverse group categories, and reach out to them and see whether they're interested in supplying to them, and then help them through the process, because I think, as Lenny said, it can be quite complex. But procurement people, once they're engaged with this, they really do want to help make this work. So really just, really just sort of tap into that.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And we will be circulating some more resources, but I think, to Joanne's point, identify yourself loudly and proudly if you do own and run a business, and if you are from a minority group or an underrepresented group, it's something that, you know, I run my own business and it's focused on the gender pay gap. So it's clearly focused on supporting minorities, but I've never really identified in that way openly to companies because I didn't really know I should. And I didn't know those opportunities existed. So I hope for some of you here today, we've opened your eyes to the fact that there are these procurement programs that will help you create those pathways. If you run a business and if you've been impacted because of the lockdowns, please let me know in the chat. You can put it in the general chat or DM me privately. Ruby Connection, Westpac, and certainly, you know, the team at Pep Talk would love to know how we can help support you. We appreciate that this is a particularly challenging time. And if you work for a company that would like to support more diverse suppliers, again, please pop it in the chat so that people here today can reach out to you and start to build those relationships. If you're comfortable sharing your LinkedIn, by all means do that as well. We would love for you all to connect and start to build those relationships that Lenny, Narelle, and Joanne have all talked about today. Lenny, I'm conscious of time. I like to be a bit of a stickler. We've got 3 minutes to go, so I might give you a minute each to kind of wrap up. The one piece of advice, if someone's watching today and they want to get involved and they want to sort of take that step, what's the one thing you think that they can do next week to move the needle forward in terms of getting involved with procurement programs?
So I think you need, as a female, you know, we just need to remember to back ourselves, you know, show up as you have the right to be there, because you do have a right to be there. So, you know, that's the biggest thing, you need to back yourself. And then I just think, you know, get on the phone, you know, just, you know, have the search out those people. There's lots of people there. You never know where a connection is going to come from. You know, sometimes I laugh when I started thinking about how did I get to that person, and it can be like 10 people's link in the chain how you ended up there. You know, Joanne has been a great supporter of putting me in contact with, she mentioned WeConnect, and I just thought it was really funny. They're calling me from Singapore to put me in touch with Lend-Lease out of Sydney, and I'm in Perth. You know, sometimes you never know where the link is going to come from. So, you know, yeah, just show up and ask questions, and, you know, we're all here to help, you know, and everything that's once, you know, that is now big started small, and even the big corporates, they're full of people. So, you know, It's all about relationships, really.
That's a wonderful takeaway, Lenny. I so appreciate that. Thank you. Narelle, what about you? What's the one thing that you reckon all those budding entrepreneurs who would, you know, really love to at one point be as big and as successful as your wonderful companies, what's the one thing, the one step they can take next week, do you think? Or maybe over the weekend, if they work weekends. I don't know. I don't want to judge. Not everyone takes the weekends off. What's the one thing they can do, do you think, Narelle?
Yeah, so I think that the things that people should do, number one, be prepared. Know exactly what it is that you want. Know exactly what you want out of the call that you make. You know, you only get one chance to make that first impression. So if you're going to pick up the phone and make that call, make it count. Know exactly what it is that you're on the phone for and what you want to get out of that. As Lenny said, resilience is really important in making those connections. So don't be afraid to do that. And it's really difficult, in fact, impossible to get those big contracts unless you have systems and processes in place. It's really, if you want to grow your business and improve the value of your business, you really have to start thinking about systems and processes, because that is the critical factor for getting big contracts. You know, that's kind of the underlying target, if you like. But really know what you're looking for, go out there and ask for it. Be brave. You know, if you're picking up the phone and there's a lady on the other end, good chance she wants to help you. So just go for it.
Just go for it. And remember, there's a good chance the person on the other end of the phone or the email does want to help you. I think that sometimes we get overwhelmed and we forget that. That's awesome advice. Narelle, I feel like I want to put a lot of the things the two of you have said onto t-shirts today, you know, or mugs to kind of remind me when you're having those days. Joanne, I'd love to have you sort of, you know, wrap things up for us today. What would you say is the one thing that maybe holds people back from being successful in the process, that anyone who's thinking about going through a procurement process could think about sort of troubleshooting now so that doesn't become a hindrance? Is there one challenge that you see again and again and again that, you know, you think could be easily overcome with some preparation?
Probably just confidence. Make sure you get your pitch right. Research the company that you're approaching. make sure that you tell them what you sell that they want to buy, and don't be afraid to ask a referral if the answer's no. Because, and it might not be that, it might be the answer's no now, but in a year's time, because big corporates, their procurement processes can be 3 to 5 years. You might think, oh, that didn't work out now. But for example, I put all my contacts on file, and it might not be an opportunity coming up now, but somewhere in my file, I'll be like, oh yeah, that person, yep, that, and contact them every 6 months, let them know how it's going. But just don't be afraid, because we actually really, really want to be able to buy from diverse businesses, including women-owned businesses. We just think it's so important. It just makes good procurement sense.
Makes good procurement sense, makes good business sense, right? And we know that even when we look at, you know, women-owned businesses that receive investment return a 3 times higher return on investment than the same companies who are run only by men. So we know that we're out there, we know that we're getting things done, building amazing businesses just like Lenny and Narelle. And I think that's really interesting, Joanne, that it can be a 3 to 5 year procurement process. That's pretty remarkable, and that's something.
So it's a cycle.
Cycle rather than process. That's cycle. So it can, so it's worthwhile. You know, if it's a no, it's not a no forever. It's maybe just a no, not right now. Really fascinating insights, Joanne. I really appreciate it. I feel like, you know, there could be PhDs written on this. We could do a feature-length film conversation about this. There's a lot to unpack. But listen, let's continue the conversation online. Ruby Connection, their website has some fabulous resources. A heap of people have popped their LinkedIn links into the comments. Please feel free to do so if you feel comfortable with that, so that you can connect with other people in the Ruby community. We will circulate some resources as well as the recording of this conversation in the next couple of hours so that you can take another look at this. But I just want to acknowledge our panelists today. Thank you so much for joining us, Lenny, Narelle and Joanne. Fascinating conversation. Thank you again to Ruby Connection and Westpac for supporting these conversations, for supporting women in business, and for supporting all of us to become financially empowered. And especially thanks to you all for giving up your time. We know that time is money, especially when you're working in or running a business, and we're grateful to you. So we look forward to seeing you this time next month, when we're actually going to be talking all things salary negotiation, in honor of the fact that next month is Equal Pay Day in Australia. That falls in August. So we will be talking about salary and pay next month. So make sure you keep an eye out for that one too. It's been a delight as always. I hope you all have a safe weekend and a safe rest of the lockdown, if that applies to you. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye. Thanks, Lenny. Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate it.